Like Rome, America's fallen republic and failing empire has turned from commerce to conquest to sustain her unsustainable debt and life way. Mercs, mercenaries, known today by the politically correct term of military contractors, less employed since GWAT's wind down, are back in business. The Venezuelan conquest will fuel the rise of private armies, paralleling the Roman Empire's structure, in which Caesar and Pompey had their own private troops. Armies that do not answer to nation-state governments, transnational corporations, and oligarchs. This history is our future. Most significantly, as in GWAT, these mercs will be paid, well paid, because Trump's new policy of American imperialism and empire conquest could pay off very well. So well, in fact, it might even balance the budget. Asset forfeiture of cars, houses, guns, and cash has long been a part of law enforcement. I ought to know. I've literally done tons of it. But Trump just internationalized it and applied it to the nation state. In doing so, he may have just found the only way to balance the budget. On January 2nd, President Trump authorized the arrest of Nicolas Maduro, former Venezuelan dictator, on drug trafficking charges. This unprecedented action, seizing a foreign head of state and bringing him to face justice in American courts, signals that the war on drugs and the cartels has entered a new and decisive phase. This is not symbolic politics. This is war, the war on the cartels. Since taking office, Trump has systematically dismantled the drug cartel apparatus, designating cartels as foreign terrorist organizations through the executive order, authorizing U.S. military strikes to destroy drug boats departing Venezuela before reaching American waters, and now, with Maduro's arrest, demonstrating that no one, regardless of power, is beyond the reach of American justice when they are poisoning our citizens. In the last 7 years, more than 600,000 Americans have died from drug overdoses, exceeding U.S. combat deaths from World War II. Fentanyl poisoning is now the leading cause of death for Americans aged 18 to 50, claiming 140,000 lives in 2022 alone. The homeless crisis devastating our cities is overwhelmingly a drug crisis, with methamphetamine and fentanyl addicts compromising the vast majority of those living in the streets. A top White House priority for Venezuela in the aftermath of Nicolas Maduro is restarting and ramping up the country's oil production. But that's a tall order, given the many years of decaying and neglected infrastructure. Despite that Maduro's VP, now acting President Delcy Rodriguez, is currently running the country, there are still lots of power vacuums if hostile forces challenge Caracas. There's not just the question of political challenge or even military insurgency, which could further destabilize the country, but the role of the cartels. All of this political and security uncertainty surrounds the question of rebooting the alien oil industry, which, though sitting atop the world's biggest proven oil reserves, has a derelict and largely defunct infrastructure for getting it out of the ground and refining it. Major oil companies are now being courted by the administration, which must convince them that they can operate in enough safety to be successful, not just for the coming months, but for years down the line. President Trump, however, is reportedly wary of placing American boots on the ground for what will be seen as at home as another indefinite foreign occupation. CNN reports last Thursday that one administration plan being molded right now is tapping military contractors or mercenaries to protect Venezuela's oil industry as American companies move in. Discussions on how to secure these assets remain in the early stages. Sources say still, multiple private security companies are already jockeying to get involved in the U.S. presence in Venezuela, according to a person familiar with the matter. Interest is high given the potential payday during the Iraq War. The U.S. spent some $138 billion on private security, logistics, and reconstruction contractor firms. Last week, the Department of Defense put out a request for information to contractors about their ability to support possible U.S. military operations in Venezuela. And I'm real familiar with that because Warrior School used to have a lot of government contracts on training, deploying troops in Operation Noble Eagle to Iraq and Afghanistan. Contractors are also in touch with the State Department's Overseas Building Operations Office to cite interest in providing security if and when the U.S. Embassy in Venezuela reopens. Turning to private contractors is certain to invite scrutiny. Over the past 2 decades, the U.S. have relied heavily at times on private contractors, especially during the heyday of the Iraq War. And I was on active duty for that. But they were marred in controversy, from killing Iraqi citizens to allegedly allegations of war profiteering. Indeed, it's never a good look when Washington talks of liberating people from a tyrant quickly results in trigger-happy foreign mercenaries rolling into your local neighborhood, barking orders backed off by endless firepower, all for cool hundreds of dollars per hour. And this is what happened with the Blackwater debacle. And I used to train my troops. I trained all the intelligence agencies and all the military branches, including the Coast Guard. And the Blackwater debacle, where the Blackwater guys were killed for their arrogance and then burned and hung from the bridge, was a special scenario of teaching them how to survive that. U.S. oil companies are up against significant risk with few guarantees given the billions which will be needed to be invested. There's a reality check on Venezuelan oil. Geologists who have worked the area know that most of the 300 billion barrels of oil reserves touted for Venezuela are in the Orinoco tar belt, where heavy, high sulfur crude has an API of 8.5 if you are lucky. And so when you have the gas and sulfur in the wells, it doesn't work. Carving up oil fields in Venezuela won't solve America's commerce problem, nor will it balance the $1 trillion budget, but duplicating American conquest in Mexico and Colombia might. Trump has already broached the subject, and U.S. Special Forces Green Berets, in fact, my old Latin America-centered group, 7 Special Forces Group, are quietly back in Mexico. Like Director of National Intelligence Gabbard, the best DNI in a long time, in my opinion, I was not for the Venezuela invasion. Mexico remains the logical course of action for the drug war. Colombia is another farther but probable target. Seizing the vast resources of Mexico and Colombia by force of arms could conceivably balance the budget. This would be an enormous undertaking, resulting in untold spilt American blood and spent American treasure. And the audacity required may even be beyond Trump's ambition. It is not, however, beyond the ambition of the deep state, already engaged in an unwinnable proxy war with the ancient country of unconquerable Russia. But that is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Venezuela, it seems, was a practice op for Iran. Could seizing Iran's oil fields resources significantly reduce U.S. debt? Undoubtedly. But again, the first military question always is, can we take it? The answer, if yes, begets another even more important question, oft forgot by genius generals and veteran civilian so-called defense experts. Can we hold it? As an authentic intelligence officer, I know the answer. Like Russia and Afghanistan, the terrain itself makes the permanent conquest of Iran untenable. The ancient nation of Persia, mentioned in Scripture, while young America is not, cannot be held. It can be occupied for a time, but in the end, the bleed rate will determine the exit rate. So why is Trump prioritizing Iran over Mexico and Colombia over Venezuela? Our deep state intelligence apparatus, which runs our POTUS and Congress as modern Praetorian guards, are themselves infiltrated via espionage and run by Mossad for Israel. And Israel has targeted Iran next. Trump, as America's first Jewish and totally Zionist president, as well as Congress, enthralled to the APIC, the bipartisan pro-Israel Political Action Committee, are at the behest and call of Israel. Thus, Trump's switch from commerce to conquest via a real drug war, while it could work audaciously and spectacularly, will not, in my analysis, happen, simply because Israel has no interest in seeing America succeed. Indeed, Israel's plan is to bleed America, China, and Russia dry, so Israel is preeminent. In 2001, Netanyahu said the U.S. is easily manipulated. It is recorded. Netanyahu was heard telling Israeli settlers, I know what America is. America is a thing you can move very easily, move it in the right direction. They won't get in the way. America is a fallen republic turned failing empire, run by a Praetorian Guard puppet masters in the CIA and FBI, who are in turn run by Mossad's Praetorians. Conquest will shore up the failing American empire for a time, but Revelations 21:2 describes New Jerusalem descending from the heaven. I saw the holy city, the New Jerusalem, coming down out of the heavens from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. What then has happened to the earthly Jerusalem? It has obviously been obliterated. What then of Israel-aligned America? She fades into the obscurity of history, as England was once the British Empire, and tiny Italy was once the mighty Roman Empire. So too will go the United States of America. And as an old country boy who self-identifies with the great Roman general Cincinnatus, and I'm from Cincinnati, who saved the Republic and then returned to his farm and gave up power, and preceding Washington's same deed of greatness, I am just fine with that. Rape born, orphan adopted, blessed bastard, indigenous initiated, martial arts mastered, psyops and special forces served. Decades of duty in DEA and DIA, intelligence deducted, sabotage and slandered, corruption crucible, deep state betrayed, Yeshua saved, whistleblower warrior, reject in revenge, repurposed in redemption, as chaplain, leader, teacher, and truth teller, now America's intelligence officer, following God, leading my family, and rallying all patriots to rescue our republic by restoring a virtuous populace. Welcome, I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. And that was my new Substack. Hope you liked it. Really good show today. See comments on Rumble, at least. Nobody yet on X. Lots of important stuff today. So we have the exclusive on the secret sonic weapon, the truth about it. It's not a sonic weapon. It is a weapon, which is even worse. But we will get into that with my special guest. Israel on high alert for Iran war. And thanks to Trump, U.S. Drug overdoses are down 20%. America rejects reset with 43% spiritual resurgence. And then we'll have targeted justices. Richard Lighthouse reveals the Venezuelan secret weapon. So things I'm not talking about today, or I'm not going to be talking about Trump's Greenland deal. There is no deal, despite what you're seeing all over. It's a future deal. So there's nothing done yet. So that's just all hype. And I'm not going to talk about Trump's peace board because it is meaningless as well. Because Israel will do what it's always doing. It'll break any peace board or truce and go ahead. I will mention that my book, Chase, which is Terror on the Border, Fact-Based Fiction by a former DEA agent, which was originally a script with Wes Studi and Val Kilmer attached, and could be true, is now available as an audiobook. And so I've put that out there on my Patreon. And I'll try and put it in the chat, or maybe somebody else can go on Amazon for me. Earl Jackson says, microwave weapon. Earl, you are so smart. You are way ahead. Yes, my audience is so smart. Sometimes they know better than I what's going on. But if you are like a lot of people now and you're driving a long way and you want to read my book, you can now read it. I picked out the voice. It's a nice masculine voice suiting Chase, the character, because, there's a lot of me in that character. But anyway, Chase is now available as an audiobook. It's already available as a paperback and, of course, as a Kindle as well. But anyway, the first thing is Israel is gearing up for war. Israel preparing for a surprise war. That means it's going to be a false flag. And that means we are going to be dragged into it. Israel's military is stepping up readiness in the face of a potential unexpected conflict. The country's top general said on Monday, signaling increased alertness and ongoing regional tensions. And that means we're going to be part of that as well. And that probably means a false flag against us. Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, chief of staff of the Israeli Defense Forces, visited the headquarters of the Home Front Command on Monday alongside its commander, Major General Shai Kalper. During the visit, he stressed that the IDF and civilian defense forces are preparing for the possibility of a sudden outbreak of war. They're telling us what they're going to do. They are going to start a war, and they're probably going to start a war through another false flag event. You see all these stories coming out right now about Iran aggression. And also Netanyahu offered similar remarks on the same day in the Knesset, stating that if Israel is attacked, it would respond with a force of a kind the adversary has not seen before. And Trump has said this as well. So what I'm telling you is get ready for the next big false flag, because that is what Mossad wants. Like I said, if we're going to do the drug war, the best place to start is Mexico. I worked Mexico a lot, worked the border, worked Mexico City, worked the Mexican-Guatemalan border. And then after that, Colombia, major producer of cocaine. That would have been the place to really start the drug war, not Venezuela. But again, Venezuela was prepped for Iran because that's what Israel wants. But I will give credit because 1 year after Trump is in, there is a drug overdose massive decline. And that's thanks to Trump. I don't always agree with what I share, but I agree wholeheartedly herein. And Trump, along with USBP, U.S. Border Patrol, and ICE, deserve the credit. Now, Arizona, via her Mexican border, is the cartel's main drug corridor, and that's why Arizona is up. But since Donald Trump has got back in the office, there is a 20% discount, 20% reduction in overdoses, according to the Centers of Disease Control. And that is, of course, due to the border closings and the ICE law enforcement. And of course, ICE is going after violent criminals. They're not going after Mexican workers. They're going after child predators and criminals. And of course, the left is supporting all of that because they have developed a self-hate. But the emergency room doctor Raul Garcia said, I'll just tell you something, where we're seeing 10 to 12 fentanyl deaths overdose every day. Now we're seeing 1 to 2. So closing the border and doing things is making a real difference. So that's very significant. And I want to give Trump credit where credit is due. And I have supported the drug cartel war. I still do. Of course, I was a former DEA special agent and snowcap operator. And I think it's a war of slavery, of chemical slavery, and very important. The number of states seeing overdose declines to a tune of 30%. That is 30% down is Louisiana, Florida, Virginia, New York, Vermont, Wyoming, District of Columbia. However, Arizona, where I used to live, is up 17%. Well, why is it up 17%? Because that's the drug cartel's main corridor, and they are going to fight to hold it. They control Nogales, they control Tucson, they control Phoenix, and then from there you can go west to LA and east to Detroit, Chicago, and New York. But that's good news, and I want to give credit. A lot of people say I'm just always picking on Trump, but I'm just telling you, giving you my intelligence assessment, and in that regard, he deserves credit. We also have good news, and Americans reporting a surging in spirituality. Of course, I am the chief chaplain and founder of Christ Connection Chaplaincy at christchaplaincy.com. christchaplaincy.com. We're never going to find the political and legal answers alone. We have to have a moral structure and be perfected in Christ because we live in a fallen world, because we have fallen human natures. So I'm always recommending join me because the spiritual warfare chaplaincy, very different than conventional church as well. But anyway, Americans are reporting a surging of spirituality. 43% faith has grown amid a national revival. Fresh data shows that 43% of U.S. adults have grown more spiritual over their lives compared to just 11% who say they've become less so. This shift highlights a broader rejection of the moral vacuum left by progressive politics, with Americans of all ages leaning into deeper faith as society grapples with division and decay. Large majorities cling to core beliefs. 86% affirm the existence of a soul. If you got a soul, that's significant because it's not just who dies with the most toys wins anymore. It's you are accountable, and there are things worth fighting, killing, and dying for. 83% believe in God or a universal spirit, which means now if you believe in a personal God, as I do, that is watching you, we are accountable for our actions. 79%, and we also expect justice. To be open in the show, I always say rejecting revenge. Why? Because revenge is the Lord's. I don't have the whole picture. I'll never be able to avenge correctly. Who will? God. And that gives me great satisfaction, especially because I've been, attacked so much, and so many others have as well. 79% sense something spiritual beyond the natural world. And of course, it's a natural intuition to be in the design of the creation, this wondrous creation, and go, wow, if this is creation is so wonderful in the design, then the designer and the creator must be even more so. So these numbers are drawn from a Pew Research Center survey underscoring a resilient spiritual foundation that defies the left's attempts to dismantle traditional values. Why does it want to do that? Because it's a satanically sourced attack to bring about chaos. So that's really good news because I'm always emphasizing how important it is to have a moral center on everything. So this stabilization mirrors a massive resurgence in Christianity, with recent data revealing the Bible sales skyrocketing by 41% since 2022, reaching 14.2 million copies in 2023 and 13.7 million in the first 10 months of 2024, far outpacing the stagnant overall book market, because people aren't reading, but they are reading the Holy Bible. And of course, when de Tocqueville came over here and looked at the American experiment, he was amazed that all the peasants in their sod houses could read and they could speak eloquently. If you look at the speeches of Washington and Lincoln, they read like biblical grammar and syntax. Why? Because every little frontier sod house had one book, and it was the Holy Bible. And not only did it teach good morals, but it also taught really good grammar and syntax. And de Tocqueville was really impressed by that, because the peasants in Europe could not read at all. That's originally what brought the Pilgrims, is when the Bible got translated to English from Latin. And they're like, whoop, this isn't what we've been taught. We got to go. So this momentum is fueled by young people, especially Gen Z, showing heightened curiosity about Jesus and the Bible per American Bible Society's 2024 State of the Bible Survey. Young men in particular are seeking the structure and community faith provides amid uncertainty. The assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk amplified this, because really Charlie's message was about Christ. That was the central figure of his message. So religious leaders are pointing to a spiritual awakening where Americans are turning to faith for answers, and that is really good news. And that's why I, again, encourage you to join me at christchaplaincy.com. You can go on there and see all my old sermons. If you like the cast, you like the sermons. And I'm not the only one. My wife is a chaplain as well. And I've other chaplains who have been with me for 25 years and more as well. But that's really the true answer. And it's not the conventional church that, is boring and you don't like at all. It's really good. So, give me some of that. It says progressive equals soft communism, and communism is, of course, atheistic. I've also got a report that the U.S. ally Kurds have asked a desperate plea for support. The Kurds were our first and best allies in GWAT. If you have seen the old shows where the horse soldiers have been on the show, there's the horse soldier bourbon bottle signed by retired Sergeant Major Vince McKellar, who was one of the original horse soldiers, the Green Beret Operational Detachment ODA 18595 that went in and overthrew the Taliban government. They were working with the Kurds. And the Kurds have been our best allies in the government war on terror. And now we are abandoning them for a former Syrian terrorist. And they're saying, please tell the Americans the situation is extremely serious. Kobani is symbolic and not just militarily, but morally. If it falls, it will be seen as revenge against the city that defeated ISIS. We need attention, pressure, and action. These were the words of Barzo, ISO, during an interview as fighting escalated along the northeastern Syria border. Barzan, who coordinates with international humanitarian organizations and works alongside the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, warned that Kurdish-held areas are facing simultaneous attacks from Syrian government forces, extremist groups, and Turkish bombings as government forces and al-Qaeda-linked fighters attack SDF-guarded prisons in an effort to free ISIS militants. History is repeating itself, he said. Once again, the United States of America is abandoning its most important ally for democracy and human rights in the Middle East. I really agree with this. I've actually reached out to Vince to see if he'll come on and talk about that. I don't know if he wants to talk about that because now he's selling bourbon, but we will see. I also said the Kurds have been defending their very existence and freedom while serving as a frontline force for those who claim to stand for humanity. Today, we wake up to see the devastating realization that we have become victims of political deals in which authoritarian regimes divide the spoils of the new Middle East under the sponsorship of those we once believed were our friends. And so he says, we will remain, but you must choose. You're going to stand with us and justice. And he said the attacks begun across the northeast Syria, including against civilians. He said forces guarding Raqqa prison were under siege. And they're guarding 600 personnel responsible for guarding ISIS detainees were trapped in the area. They're completely besieged. And the U.S. military in the area has been ordered not to participate, very much like in Afghanistan. And this is always what happens. So I've said many times, The world has never seen the equal of the American fighting man, the American warrior. And when we are unleashed, we always win. But we are rarely unleashed. We haven't really been unleashed since World War II. And we are always sabotaged now because of the deep state. Because after World War II, the OSS ends, Special Forces comes along, which has done great. And I'm prejudiced because I served in Special Forces, but CIA comes along, and that's the beginning of the deep state Praetorian Guard, and they never, ever let us win. And now we are abandoning our allies there. Give me some of that. I have some of that bourbon, very smooth. Yeah, I'm a bourbon guy because my dad's from Kentucky, the hunting ground, and Horse Soldier bourbon is excellent. Definitely. My other favorite is Blanton's. But it is really good stuff. Yes. And it's cool that I got a couple signed bottles as well. So also, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, and I think this is one of the best DNIs, and I used to stand outside the DNI's office a lot way back in the day, says that there is now evidence that electronic voting machines have been tampered with to manipulate election outcomes in the United States as we witness the overthrow of the U.S. government in November 3rd, 2020. That's the DNI. This is the Director of National Intelligence saying there was a coup in 2020 and the voting machines were corrupted. Now, I reported on that in detail. Lots of other libertarian luminaries reported on that in detail. But this is the Director of National Intelligence saying that. For a lady, she's got some big brass ones. The report says 2.7 million Dominion votes for Trump deleted, 221,000 in Pennsylvania, 941,000 Dominion in other states, 19,000 switched from Trump to Biden. And of course, that's intelligence, which is designed to protect sources and methods, handed off to the Department of Justice. And it's never good when you hand off intelligence because you always want to protect. Intelligence does not make good evidence. Evidence is fact-based truth of it, that is used in court, and intelligence is analyzed information that protects sources and methods. But she's handed it off to Bondi. Of course, we know what's going to happen there. Nothing is going to happen. DOJ is also blocking an independent special master from overseeing the Epstein disclosures. So in September of last year, Trump called the Epstein controversy an irrelevant Democratic host. In response to Trump's DOJ redacted release, Congressman Massey and Democratic Representative Ro Khanna pushed for a special master to provide independent oversight and ensure both compliance and speed. And the DOJ is going to block that. So I still get comments from Trump worshipers who ask for receipts on my analysis that he is deep state captured. So one more time here. Here is Trump's key executive, the DOJ AG, siding with the deep state, which is the intelligence community, Mossad, CIA pedophiles. For the last time, Trump's refusal to replace Bondi is the receipt itself. He is clearly on record supporting CIA, FBI, and dismissing Epstein and his pedo gang, which raped children as young as 8 and 12. But let's get real. If you still support Trump over this, then he, not Yeshua, is your Messiah. Because Jesus was clear in Matthew 18:6. He declared, but if anyone causes one of these little ones to believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for him to have a large millstone hung around his neck and be drowned in the depths of the sea. So, please don't send me any more mail saying, what are your receipts for Trump being captured by the deep state? And finally, got another note from my most prolific fan mail writer, Mickey Pastor. And Mickey is saying he is, I'm praying for your student that had a triple transplant. So he hasn't had the triple transplant, Mickey and everybody else. It's Carlos Reyes and his mother is Carla. They're in Minnesota. He needs a triple transplant. Now, one of the chaplains has flown out there. We've sent all kinds of stuff. We're praying for him. He's doing a lot better. He's actually mobile, but he still needs the transport. If you want to pray for Carlos Reyes, he was one of my young students as a teenager, and young black belt that I'm teaching. Please do, and you can also learn more about that at ChristChaplaincy.com. And we do these prayer requests, and they do work really well. We're praying for another lady with stage 4 cancer, and she is really, really recovering nicely. So anyway, that's what's going on. That's the intelligence going on. But I want to get to my special guest because that's the title of the show. This is the exclusive on the secret sonic weapon truth. It's not really a sonic weapon, as Earl Jackson already figured out. And I am, honored to be on the Targeted Justice board. But the man behind the Targeted Justice, the driving force, is Richard Lighthouse. He's got a master's from Stanford. He's got really incredible papers on particle physics. Worked with NASA, and he is quite the expert on the weaponry that was used in Venezuela, and which has also been used on American citizens and citizens worldwide. And we're going to get into the details of all of that with him. So, Richard, welcome back to the Paper Point, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Major Crowley, for having me on. Yeah.
So, did I get your credentials right, or is there anything you should add about those?
No, that's fine. I'm not big on credentials. We just got to get the job done.
Yeah, and you are doing great at that, working really hard. But you have a really good insight. You corrected me immediately that this is not a sonic weapon. This is a neurological weapon. This is the microwave weapon. And you've also delineated the fakes. And I think one important thing here is I think the government is pushing these stories of a sonic weapon to cover up the real weapon, because the real weapon has been used against American citizens. And that is the definition of democide, when the government is killing its own citizens. Do you agree with that, or am I off on that?
No, I think you're right on, Major Prather. It's a staggering idea, and most people can't really get their arms around it, that their own government would attack civilians with military weapons. But that's in fact exactly what's happening. It's not just simple attacks; it's literal torture. It is also treason. These are very strong words, but I'm not using those terms lightly. We have U.S. military forces in the Space Force that are attacking civilians on U.S. soil. It is literally an act of treason, and it involves torture. So very disturbing.
And it kind of goes, and the government has a long history of attacking civilians and citizens. It's been done many times. It's not like it's new. There's plenty of historical incidents of that happening, and also looking at MK Ultra, that's kind of the beginning, at least in my mind, the basis for all that. And I even saw some Netflix show, and it was pretty outrageous, and they were beating people, and there were sexual things. I'm like, well, that can't be right. That's not what MK Ultra. But then I did my research, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, that is actually how perverted and sick and evil they were about this, because at the base of this, it's all satanically sourced.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's difficult for our members, and especially people in foreign countries that really look to America for moral leadership. And there's clearly a lot of areas for improvement. Targeted Justice, one of our main missions is to educate, inform the public and legislators about what's going on. So that's a big part of our daily activities and routines, is trying to get the word out.
And with this weapon being used and then coming out, and there was a story of the Maduro bodyguard saying, it killed hundreds and we were helpless against it. I think this is a really important time to talk about this, because really this has been hushed, this has been covered up or denied, even though there's plenty of evidence of that. So that's why I think this is particularly relevant for us to get into right now. So where do you want to start? I know this is a deep subject, but we got plenty of time, and we can put up whatever PowerPoints you want to go, but please walk us through this whole weaponry and define really what it is.
Okay. So first of all, I just want to say there's an unusual amount of disinformation around this whole subject. We heard from CNN not too long ago claiming that there are handheld weapons that government agents paid millions of dollars for. This is fake news and psyop, very typical for CNN, unfortunately. There are no handheld weapons. The reason we know that is the amount of electricity requires greatly exceeds anything that could be put into a handheld weapon. The best analogy that I can give is the amount of energy and electricity. If you try to take all the water in a swimming pool and put it into a handheld paper cup, you just can't do it. And people still be convinced that it's some kind of big device and you just plug it into the wall and it works. No, it requires a massive amount of electricity. So these devices are rated on order of 100 million watts. It's a staggering sum of electricity, and a typical microwave oven is rated at maybe 1,000 or 1,500 watts. So these weapons are 10,000 times more powerful than your microwave oven in your kitchen. And I'm going to get into that, why that's relevant is to what we saw in Venezuela. But let me go ahead and switch to the presentation mode, and let's see if we can get this to work.
And that's a great thing that you do, is you're very careful about delineating reality and not getting into drama, so that you are building authenticity with targeted justice all the time, because there can be a lot of claims and hallucinogenics and drama around that. That's something I really admire, the way you do that. So let's see. I think you've got it pulled up here. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to bring that on.
Okay.
There and there.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, there's a lot of disinformation out there. This is actually very old technology. The basic product or device is called a Vercator, U.S. patent 4345220. There's a man named John Sullivan that is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He is the inventor. This goes back to around 1979, 1980. It went through the patent processing, and he immediately signed his invention to the U.S. Air Force. He was working under contract to the Air Force Weapons Lab at the time. And this is, one of the very powerful weapons that were developed at that time. So this became, it was actually manufactured under a company called the Titan Corporation in the early 80s, and it was nicknamed the Thunderbolt system. This is the key product that was used in President Reagan's Star Wars program. It is not a laser beam, it's a microwave beam. The Strategic Defense Initiative, it was and still is the key element. So in spite of what the news media says, that entire system became fully operational by 1992, but elements of it were operational back in the 1980s. So this is old technology, very powerful, and it still works today. So let's go to the next one.
And this is directed energy weapons.
It is a directed energy weapon. That's correct. So this is what it actually looks like. These are manufactured by a company called Physica Applied Technologies. They're in San Leandro, California. Same plant that was occupied by the Titan Corporation back in the 1980s. They make these devices there. They weigh hundreds of pounds. They use a staggering amount of electricity, and they are mounted on satellites in orbit. They are very precisely controlled according to GPS coordinates. The accuracy is to within 1/2 of an inch. They are extremely accurate. This particular weapon is nicknamed or a brand name called the Reltron. And basically what it is a Vercator that with efficiency improvements. And we've got a recent newsletter at targetedjustice.substack.com where we compare the differences between the Reltron and the Vercator. But the Reltron is basically,
I posted that on my Patreon and Locals, guys. So those of you can find that. So you can even look it up right now if you're members. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you're into the technology, this is a very well-developed technology. It's been around for decades, and it is staggeringly powerful. This is the weapon that causes Havana syndrome. I'm going to get a little pushback on that, but I'm absolutely certain of it. I've been doing my homework on this for many years. This is the weapon that causes Havana syndrome and AHI. So here's some interesting things that can be reverse engineered from this simple photograph. You'll see right here in the middle, there's a rectangular flange. That's called a waveguide. And waveguides operate at a very specific frequency. I estimate that waveguide is 2" by 4" based on the size in this photograph. And from that, we can identify the frequency that this unit operates at. And so it operates based on that waveguide. We know that it operates between about 1.5 to 2.5 gigahertz. So what's interesting is what falls in between that range that allows it to operate. And there's a very unique frequency that your kitchen microwave oven operates at, 2.45 gigahertz. That's within the range of this tunable device. So they can tune that in where it optimizes stimulating water molecules. This is what we saw in Venezuela. They can fire this. It's a giant microwave oven, basically. It's 10,000 times more powerful than the microwave oven in your kitchen. If you point it at a person, they instantly start cooking them from the inside out. That's what causes the instant nausea and vomiting, and it bursts the blood vessels in the nose. And we've seen the picture of Maduro being led by military forces away from the compound, and he's got blood all over the front of his shirt as though either his nose or his mouth was bleeding. It turns out when you turn that device on and point it at someone, it instantly causes nausea, vomiting, and bursts the blood vessels in the nose. And that's exactly what we saw. That's not something you can do with a handheld weapon. This is an extremely powerful weapon.
Yeah, that was impressive to see that. I mean, it is intelligence, but it sure looks like it. Yeah, and it certainly matched the descriptions in the stories that they're putting out.
We have multiple reports of people that were intelligence agents and State Department personnel have reported Havana syndrome effects as well as bloody noses. So it's consistent with the reports that we see in the intelligence community and consistent with what we saw in Venezuela. The devices can be ramped up or down in power, and they're tunable. They can actually adjust the settings inside this weapon to give it a different frequency output. So that's one of the later developments they did at this company. So very interesting. So how are they able to identify the guards on the ground? There were hundreds of guards on the ground that were apparently taken out very quickly. It's because every one of them was precisely tracked on the top of their head. Targeted Justice has been saying this since 2018. Everyone in the United States, everyone in South America, everyone in Europe. We haven't had tests all over the world, but just every single person we have tested in Texas, in Colorado, and around Washington, D.C., this is called a Gauss master meter. It's an analog meter, displays that you have a tracking pulse on the top of your head. They're not tracking your cell phone. They are tracking the location of your head 24 hours a day. That's what these Lockheed and Boeing GPS satellites do. All of that information is relayed to Schriever Base near Colorado Springs. It's grossly illegal. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And yet the Space Force continues to do this every day. They know it's illegal. It's outrageous.
So let me jump in there for a second, because I talk about this in my book, Initiation. I talk about this all the time in the chaplaincy when we were opening the energy centers and we're trying to emulate Yeshua in where he would pray all night as opposed to talking. We're talking about the electromagnetic bioluminescence that emanates from a person, from the energy centers, and then from the crown or the Christ energy center at the top of the head. It's not that that's the real problem with astronauts too. It's not really a lack of gravity. It's getting away from the electromagnetic field of the Earth. The mitochondria require that. And again, that's why the chaplaincy is so important. But please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's an issue that we've been pushing on, and we really need to get some resolution to it. We need to get more congressmen and senators aware that this is happening, because they're literally tracking everyone. If you're a U.S. Citizen, your precise location is tracked 24 hours a day. Grossly illegal. For the skeptics out there, I want to show you what the Space Force, these guys are called space weapons officers, and we've identified more than 30 of them on LinkedIn that are self-identifying. You'll see this right here. This is a guy named John Slaughter. He's a vice commander, and this is somewhat dated. I don't know that he is still in this role, but he identifies as a space weapons officer based at Schriever Base. And you'll see right here where I've highlighted this in yellow: second in command of DoD's sole space electromagnetic warfare focus Delta. So their division is called Delta 3. And this guy is pretty high up, and there's at least 30 more on LinkedIn that are self-identifying as space weapons officers. So that device we just showed you is generically called an electromagnetic weapon. This is what they operate. And I'll show you on this next slide right here. And again, these are just two examples out of about 30. This particular guy, I'm not going to give his name, but he is a sergeant. And you'll see right down here, he worked at Schriever Base. And again, this is somewhat dated. It's about 10 years old. This is before they were called the Space Force. This is when they were called Air Force Space Command, but then changed their name to the Space Force. You'll see right here, out of the approximately 9,000 people at Schriever Base, 1,300 are directly involved in operations, and he's admitting they have 9 weapon systems in orbit. So it's unusual for someone to make a revelation like that, but there it is in writing on LinkedIn, public information that anybody can tap into, and it's one of the bits of research that Targeted Justice has done over the years.
And that's another reason why the whole space program, we don't go back to the moon, we don't go out, we can't even keep the astronauts up and bring them back, because the whole program has been militarized, and it's classified, and it's all eyes down. It's no eyes out anymore. And that's because you got to hold the high ground, and space is, of course, the highest ground.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate. These guys are directly involved in this. They know that U.S. civilians are being tracked and attacked with military weapons, and yet it goes on every day. We have identified many cases of what appear to be staged suicides at both Schriever and Peterson Base, and we suspect that this is the method that they're using to keep people silent. Lots and lots of staged suicides, and they cover it saying that it's simply a psychological issue, it's stress. No, I honestly believe that many of these folks were whistleblowers that were trying to come forward, and this is the method they're using to keep it quiet. So more information for folks that want to dig a little deeper, targetedjustice.com. We've got a newsletter we put out every week, targetedjustice.substack.com, and we welcome your comments and feedback.
That's great. And do you have another presentation as well?
No, that's it. I just wanted to have a few slides to show folks that we're not just pulling this out of thin air, that this is something that's very real. We've got tangible evidence to back it up. We're trying to get away from the disinformation that's out there that's quite significant. We're dealing with a lot of feedback and skeptics
right.
that don't feel like we're doing our homework properly. But I think we've got some compelling evidence here. We're trying to get that into the right hands in Washington, D.C., and it's an ongoing process.
Well, and that's because, so let's talk a little bit about the disinformation, because the disinformation can then be discredited, and therefore the real stuff is then discredited. This is a typical ploy that they do. They put out these, just like they put out this sonic weapon story as a cover, then it can be discredited. Then you think there's nothing behind it at all. Typical of intelligence agencies running psyops. That's important, I think, to understand as well. Do you agree with me on that?
Absolutely. So what we see, Grok actually has. I'm a fan of Grok because it's not perfect. It's far from perfect, but it does seem to be truth-seeking. And our own Dr. Lynn Baer challenged Grok to look at some of the disinformation that was put out by CNN recently, and Grok came to the conclusion that it statistically suggested that it was 80 to 90% likelihood that this was a psyop, that CNN was projecting and permitting a psyop, and Project Mockingbird, as Tulsi Gabbard has stated, is very real and apparently still ongoing. So this appears to be yet another example of the CNN working closely with the CIA, and it's just unfortunate. It really needs to be stopped.
Well, if you've sent me a whole bunch of other stuff. If you want to put up some other slides or PowerPoints, I'd love to see them. But before we get to that, let me ask you. So originally, Havana Syndrome comes out with a couple of diplomats. That's, I believe, where it was first noticed. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we've seen cases of the Havana Syndrome all over the world. Our own Dr. Lynn Baer is probably one of the world's leading experts on the subject, and he understands the diagnostic tools. He understands the symptoms. He understands a lot of the cover-up that's been involved, unfortunately. And we're still struggling to get recognition for our civilian registry that Dr. Lynn Baer has been heading up for some time now, and get recognition that it's not just the intelligence community that is affected. There are real civilians that have been diagnosed by the same doctors that diagnosed the State Department and CIA personnel. Dr. Michael Hoffer at the University of Miami has diagnosed some of these civilians, and he was just as stunned, saying, we can't explain this. Why would anybody want to attack civilians? So it's an ongoing effort. It's very important that we get this information out, that there is an active cover-up. The CIA doesn't want the public to know that civilians are involved, because that really pulls the lid off a much larger program.
Yes, and a personal anecdote, though, is every federal special agent rotates on to being the duty agent, that you're the duty agent for a week. And what that means is if you have a walk-in to the office, then you go see them. And every special agent who's been a duty agent has met with somebody who literally had tinfoil hat and a legal pad covered. And I had that experience many times too. My conclusion was these guys are all saying the same thing. There must be something to it, because those have just been happening for so long. But my question to you is, it seems to be becoming, as it develops more, they are using it more, which is pretty typical of military weaponry is, hey, we got it, now let's use it, and indiscriminately, because it seemed initially that it was at some particular diplomats or intelligence personnel. Then it's been being used on various civilians. Now it was used on reportedly like 100 of Maduro's troops. That would seem to me to be the big mass use of it so far. Does that make sense, or?
Well, I wish we knew all the instances that it's been that these weapons have been used. They're clearly being used indiscriminately on U.S. civilians, and Targeted Justice has received literally hundreds, if not thousands, of cases from all over the world. These weapons are being misused. They were put in orbit for what seemed to be a good purpose. The weapons are designed to track and attack a ballistic missile, and to disarm it and disable it before it reaches the perigee, and and then the warhead is armed. So if it can take out the missile before it gets to that point, then by frying the electronics in the navigation system in the nose cone, it seems like a very clever solution to take out ballistic missiles. But of course, they parked it up there, and they almost immediately started pointing it at civilians on the ground. We've got cases from a gentleman named Harlan Gerard, who has since passed away, but spent decades trying to convince people that he was being attacked from satellites. And of course, this was before there were cell towers. There's another gentleman in the greater New York area, Norman Rabin. He started being attacked in 1985, and he also deduced it had to be coming from a satellite. This was before there were cell towers, before there were cell phone networks. And so by traveling around, they both deduced this has got to be coming from a satellite. So they had the system working even before it was fully operational by 1992. The Russians also have a GPS system that was fairly dysfunctional during the 1980s. The Chinese didn't really get their system going until the early 2000s. So this is how we know it had to be the Air Force Space Command that was behind it, because they were the only ones that had a functioning GPS system back in the 1980s. It cannot be another country or government. You have to have these precise GPS tracking abilities to be able to target an object or a person on the ground, and they were clearly doing it. The only country that had that capability in the early to mid 80s was the Air Force Space Command.
I have a question on Rumble. Nimpo Mike, can you ask him if the frequency can be countered with an opposite frequency, or how can we protect ourselves?
Well, in theory, and I understand what he's saying. So he's basically comparing it to noise reduction headphones. So the way that a noise reduction headphone works is by it analyzes the oncoming frequency, which is a sine wave, basically. And by inverting that sine wave and broadcasting it, you cancel out those frequencies. So it is theoretically possible to do. The problem is the amplitude. It has to be an equal amplitude. So you can imagine, even though you can determine these frequencies, and we know roughly what these frequencies are, the current Vercator weapons, some of the older models use frequencies in the 3920 to 3935 megahertz range. So that's just below 4 gigahertz. We're seeing the newer weapons are using a lower frequency that's right around the same operational frequency as a microwave oven. You could definitely detect those frequencies, but when you invert that sine wave, you've got to have it at an amplitude that's equal, which means you've got to have the same power to block that amplitude frequency, and it's a staggeringly large piece of equipment. So it's theoretically possible, but you've got to have those expensive pieces of equipment that can generate that inverted sine wave. I'm not sure if that answers his question.
No, that's a great answer. And there's a lot of comments on X and rant about Faraday stuff, Faraday seats. And you can go on jeffreybrazer.com/shop and you can get ball caps and also blankets. When my family goes into the city, because we live in the country, we really notice it. And so a lot of times we'll put on the ball caps or wrap in the blankets in the car and everything. Real Targeted Justice says, cup your ears in a quiet place. After 40 to 50 seconds, you will hear pops. That is the tracking. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yes, we are aware that cell towers are being used as a backup tracking system. So I mentioned earlier that we're aware that Lockheed and Boeing GPS satellites are used to track everybody on the ground. It's disturbing, but the way, and I think you might agree with the way the military approaches a problem, they have a plan and they have a backup plan. Right. The backup plan is they use cell towers to keep track of where your head is located, particularly if you're a targeted individual. So in the event that those tracking satellites were shut down or became inoperable, they're still going to figure out where you're at with less accuracy by using cell towers to keep track of your head.
That's just the way you get cell phone pings when you're tracking somebody's cell phone. Same kind of thing.
Same kind of thing. That's right. But for those that have concerns that they might be a targeted individual, that's one of the simple tests that you can do. Cup your ears in a quiet room and just listen. You've got to be patient because it takes about 30 to 60 seconds before it'll kick in and your ears will adjust, but you'll start hearing it sounds just like popcorn in a distant room. Pop, 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 pop. Those are tiny little microwave bullets. We've done a newsletter on it. We've got pictures of these little microwave bullets. They're very tiny. They're on the order of 1/1000th of an inch. And these are very tiny, almost like tiny laser beams, but they're made out of microwaves. And we've put Mylar over windows, and if it's in the direction of a cell tower, it'll sit there and just perforate little holes all over that sheet of Mylar.
Really?
And so you can have visual evidence that this is actually occurring, in addition to being able to hear it.
Wow. Yeah. You can also go in the shop at jeffreyprather.com, and there's Faraday curtains. You can get Faraday paint. There's lots of alternatives for this. But no, you don't have to be walking around with tinfoil over your head, Ninpo Mike. But I think that's a joke anyway. But to go back to the point of the seemingly random attacks on civilians, if we look at MK Ultra, we see the same thing a lot. And I think and people are like, well, why would you just attack random? Well, I was also a criminal investigator with the DEA. And so, as an intelligence officer, you're looking for patterns. As a criminal investigator, you're looking for evidence. And if there is something non-random, then there is a pattern to be picked up, which begins to leave an evidence trail. The intelligence information then leads to an evidence trail. But if you're just targeting people randomly, then it's much more difficult to pick up. And that's what I think, at least that's my theory of the random attacks of people that, are not particularly a position of power or influence or anything like that.
Well, that brings up a good point. We do get a lot of those questions from our own members. They're like, why me? I'm nobody. Why would they, I'm not on the National Security Council. I don't know any congressmen or senators. Why would they be interested in me? It's as we like to say, you're an experiment. They're not interested in you. They're interested in your data. That's exactly what's valuable.
That's exactly right. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. And of course, to have data, they need a lot of data, which means they got to go after a lot of people to get the metrics. And of course, they're developing different systems under different atmospherics. Armor Up says Russia used scalar waves back in the 70s and 80s, 2 ways that latch onto a target and go over 10,000 MI. Russia also defined microwave illness in 1967. Are you familiar with that?
So yeah, we did. We believe that's a disinformation report. So with the so-called Moscow signal that was used broadcast at American embassy personnel in Moscow, we've pretty much disproved that involved microwaves. It was definitely X-rays or gamma rays. So some of the symptoms of a number of the personnel there was bleeding out from the eyes, which is a very extreme condition. A number of them developed cancer very rapidly and passed away. Those are not, we've got targeted individuals in our membership that have been targeted for more than 20 years. They've never bled out from the eyes, and they're still very much alive. We're not saying cancer doesn't happen to some of them, but it's quite clear that the Moscow signal has been tried to spin it as a microwave weapon, perhaps to justify the use of the Space Force's microwave weapons. But It's very clear that the Moscow signal was actually an X-ray weapon, not a microwave weapon. That's a disinformation, a PSYOP story as well.
The reason to justify it is for an arms race.
Sure. Yeah.
Is the point there.
Yeah. Yes. If the other guy's using it, why shouldn't we? Right.
Yeah. So. Well, yeah. And that's the whole thing is you always want to have the higher ground, space gets the higher ground, except now everything is looking down. We're not looking out, at the stars. There's no more Star Trek. It's all looking down and tracking us even more intently as well. So that's fascinating. And that makes a lot of sense. But let's go back to, do you think that there's a progression? Because with the troops hitting so many troops, it looks like that was a much bigger target than previous. Usually they're kind of individual. Was the Maduro hit on the bodyguards, like the 100 troops, so to speak, the largest use of the weaponry that you've seen?
Well, it's we know that there's a minimum of 30 of these weapons in orbit. That's the minimum number, because each GPS set, apparently they're mounting them to the frame of a GPS satellite before they're launched. And it requires a very rigid structure for precision pointing on the ground. You can't have something that's flopping around or flexible at all. It's got to be a very rigid, stable structure to get the type of precision that you need. So consider if you're using basically a giant microwave oven that cooks someone from the inside out very quickly. You only need to put it on them for a few seconds, and they're going to be vomiting and bleeding and disabled. And you can go to the next guy. So depending on how many weapons you've got at any given time, there's going to be 4 or 5 of these weapons overhead. So you've got 4 or 5 weapons that only need to spend a few seconds on each target. And in less than a minute, you can cover 100 or even more people. So once they're disabled, they certainly become an easy target to a special ops guy, because he's on the ground just struggling to figure out what's going on. So a few seconds is all it takes.
So the satellite passover, I don't know what the spectrum is as they're coming over for doing it, but you're saying it would be they could move across a group, and then the next satellite would come whatever period that comes.
Well, these are not low orbit satellites. All of these satellites are basically in what's called a mid-Earth orbit. So they're basically roughly 12,000 miles altitude. So they're very high up. And if you could see one from the ground, which you can't, it would look like it wasn't even moving. So they move. It takes 12 hours for these satellites to make one rotation, basically. Okay, so they move across the sky no faster than the sun does. So if at any given time, the way they've set up these orbits, there's a minimum of 24 satellites that make up these constellations, and there's 6 standby satellites and weapons. And so if for whatever reason you lose one of these satellites, you just bring this other guy that's already in orbit and put him into position. And so that at any given time, there's at least 4, minimum 4, and usually 5, sometimes 6, that are overhead any point on the globe. Anywhere you go, you can't hide from it. There's going to be, if you're at the North Pole, the South Pole, anywhere over the ocean, they can track you. And it requires, the way this GPS tracking system works, you've got to have a minimum of 4 satellites track the top of your head, and you can get GPS coordinates of latitude, longitude, and then that 4th satellite tells you the altitude. So they're very precisely tracking each person, object. They can track all the boats. They can track all the cars, trains, whatever you want to track. It's doable with this GPS tracking system.
Arm Rep says, wow, and also why the sun feels hotter now. Yeah, the sun feels hotter and whiter in Tucson. Real Target Justice asks, how many people can one weapon attack? I guess at the same time.
Well, it depends on what you want to do. If you just want to track people, it can the way the antennas are set up, it doesn't have to physically point. Most people think in terms of like a gun, like I got to point it at somebody. But the way these antennas work, it could fire literally millions of tracking points every second, and it doesn't have to point in a new direction. It just has to alter the electromagnetic field in the antenna to get the tracking point to a different person or a different head, and it happens so fast. Imagine if you want to think in terms of numbers, because these numbers are staggering. If you've got a processor that runs at 5 gigahertz, 5 billion cycles per second, how many people can I track with that one processor? Well, the only thing I need are latitude, longitude, and altitude, plus a unique identifier. That's 4 pieces of data that I need for each person. So if I've got a processor operating at 5 gigahertz, I can track at least 1 billion people every second. Does that make sense? Those are the only things I need: latitude, longitude, altitude, and a unique identifier that says, hey, that's Richard Lighthouse. He's ID number 1740371. So that's all I need: altitude, or latitude, longitude, altitude, and a unique identifier.
Do the chemtrails have any effect on the weapons, or are they working with them at all?
Well, my understanding that the chemtrails is what they're used for is to there's different types of metallic particles,
right,
that are absorbed through the lungs into the bloodstream and embed into the brain. So it appears to be that the goal of the chemtrails is to increase the suggestibility of the brain by putting these metal particles into your brain. They make you more susceptible to these trance states or vibrations that can be sent from HAARP or from a satellite or from a cell tower. So by triggering specific frequencies on your brain, and now your brain's embedded with these medical particles. So even if you're not generally susceptible, you become more susceptible because of these contaminants that you've got into your bloodstream and into the brain. So it appears that the goal of chemtrails is to make people more highly suggestible. And we've actually got a tab on our website where we talk about, now this is a CIA term, how suggestible. Are people highly suggestible? We found that initially about 25% of the population is highly suggestible. And by using the chemtrails and the COVID shots and things like that, they've upped that number to around 35%. So the reason the CIA likes that is because when you can identify all these people who are highly suggestible, you can tell them how to vote. Right. You can tell them to show up somewhere and go buy something. You can tell them to show up, and they will think it's their own idea. It's not their idea. They're highly suggestible. They can be commanded to say or do almost anything.
I don't understand how the particles from the chemtrails, the metal, the aluminum and barium particles, are getting into the brain.
Yeah, the particles have to be so small that they've got to get through that blood-brain barrier. That's part of the problem. So these particles have to be unique characteristics, and they have to be able to get through the blood-brain barrier. I'm certainly not an expert on this. This is more of a biology type topic. Dr. Anna Mahausha, who has worked with us in the past, is actually quite knowledgeable on some of these things. Myself being an engineer, it's just my understanding in generic terms that the real purpose of the chemtrails is to get these particles into the brain and make people more highly suggestible. The mechanics of that, I think somebody with a stronger background in biology or chemistry would be helpful.
Somebody on X says metal chelation is often invoked as one of the main biological functions of melanin, maybe melatonin. It just goes ... Yeah,
again, that's really outside of my expertise, but there are a number of folks that are doing research along these lines. Dr. Anna Mahausha being one of them.
Yes. Well, that's fascinating and very timely and very worse. I mean, it brings to mind, because I was talking about how Venezuela is in my mind prepped for Iran, but going after Persia, an ancient nation, as opposed to going after Venezuela, is a whole different animal. But when I started thinking about these neurological weapons, it seems that that might change the formula. Mossad has already admitted that they are behind a lot of the protests. There's no doubt that the people of Iran have been sick of this theological tyranny for a long time. But the question is, why now? Why all of a sudden now all of this happens? And I think it's external influences. I think it's Mossad, maybe backed by CIA money, but maybe they are thinking that this is more of a viable option because of this type of weaponry. Does that make any sense, or is that too much of a stretch?
No, I think it's certainly possible. It's the general reaction that I was reading after the Venezuela operation is that most militaries around the world saw it as a real threat. They're like, we don't even know what this is, so how can we defend against it? So probably our exposure here today is going to make their products at Physica very popular. So I'm guessing they're going to get a lot of inquiries from governments and companies all over the world saying, where do we sign up and how can we buy one? Once they see what these things are capable of doing, and there's really no known defense for these weapons right now.
BV57 says Magellan's disease. I don't know what that is. Magellan's disease. Do you?
Maybe referring to Morgellons.
Morgellons.
Yes, Morgellons is supposedly famous singer Joni Mitchell suffers from Morgellons. We have a number of members at Targeted Justice that are suffering from Morgellons. It's a horrible illness. Although I'm not even sure you can qualify it as that. We have a tab on our website. There's been a very important documentary movie done that was done just a couple of years ago. Somebody who should be in the know is a man named Dr. Bill Deagle. He's a medical doctor that you may be familiar with him. Yes. He's made some very revealing statements about the things going on at Schriever Base, which Targeted Justice was very interested in. But he made some additional comments of information that he learned while at Schriever and claimed that Morgellons is caused by a worm-like organic. It is an organic life form made of silicone that does not originate from Earth. This was his claim. I'm not saying I agree with him. I don't know if it's true, but these they look like colored fibers under the skin, and they live and grow and expand and cause many problems with the person's skin. And there's really no known treatment for it. Hydrogen peroxide apparently works fairly well at suppressing it, but many doctors refuse to even treat it or look at it for a long time. So it's very unusual, but it does seem to be a subset of targeting within the TI community.
Yes, I've heard of that. I've seen those photos. Earl Jackson commenting on Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter saying that Trump's hesitation at the last second to not attack Iran was a deliberate move to dismantle a long-prepared regime change operation involving Mossad, CIA, and the usual neocon war hawks. Yeah, I've heard that. I don't buy that. I think that Trump is still in lockstep with Israel on this. I also don't follow Scott Ritter. He's a twice convicted pedo. The DOJ came after me. They never convicted me once. I might understand if he was set up once, but to be twice convicted pedo shows me he's got problems in his discernment. Real Target Justice. They tested the weapons on Americans and civilians around the world. Yes. Don't stealth aircraft use special coatings to defend against radar energy? Yeah, and that's what we're talking about with paint ability. Great presentation, Mr. Lighthouse. Thank you. Great guest. Need to have him back. Before we wrap up, if you guys got any more questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and I will ask Richard, or otherwise I'm going to let him go here pretty shortly. But very informative and very timely. And I think also, well, they may be wanting to buy more, but also as we expose them more, then maybe, they'll use them less. And maybe people will become more aware. That's what every time I expose something, I'm hoping that they won't then go through with it. And I think that's actually worked out a couple times. So hopefully that maybe we're doing that today as well.
I would hope so. I think exposing the illegal, and I understand the military's need for specific weapons, but the fact that they're using them on civilians is unconscionable and absolutely illegal. So we certainly want to expose that.
And we encourage whistleblowers to come forward. And so go through all the ways again that targeted justice can be followed here. There's targetedjustice.com, targetedjustice.substack.com. What else?
We also have Dr. Lambert has his Substack with a good deal of information on Havana syndrome and the civilian registry that we're trying to expose. I encourage folks to visit that. Anna Toledo, our general counsel, also has a Substack and does a Wednesday podcast called The Gavel, which is very informative and covers a lot of legal issues for the TI community. So I encourage folks to visit that as well.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And we'll have you back again, certainly, because the audience would love to hear more. Please keep me in the loop. And I'm happy to and honored to be a advisor to you guys. So thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you.
All right. So that is Richard Lighthouse, a very humble but experienced and certainly subject matter expert on these neurological weapons. So please like, share, and subscribe this on X and Rumble. And if you are able, go ahead and sign up at patreon.com/Jeffrey Prather at the $5, $15, or $25 level, or you can sign up at jeffreyprather.locals.com at the $9 level as well, or you can go to jeffreyprather.com and just simply support the show because I am not paid off by anybody. So remember, propaganda is the pandemic, COVID is the cult, the jab is the plague, the masquerade is for morons. The lawless now make law, the liars the news. Perverts are praised, cops culled, troops gelded, wolves flock the herd. But wolves fear bison, and bison fear nothing. Wovoka, Ghost Dance founder, dreamed with Yeshua and foretold the return of the buffalo. Tashunke Witko, Crazy Horse, saw the red race rising again as a blessing for a sick world. The frog boils slowly, but when the supply lines are slit and the smoke clears, it's sick, stupid slaves against free, wild warriors. The fearful against the fearless. Soft metrosexuals with pets versus hard vets with children. And the red line, our doorstep.